The NFL draft is officially over, so let's dive into my post-draft rookie wide receiver rankings and tiers, starting off, of course, in tier 1 with 2 players, Travis Hunter and Tet McMillan. And yes, in that order specifically. I very much view both of these guys as the wide receiver 1A and 1B in this class, so I have no issues if you prefer one over the other, but I do lean towards Travis Hunter's pure talent and upside in a better offense, even if he is alongside a much better wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. than anything else that Tet McMillan has to deal with. What I love about Travis Hunter in Jacksonville is that in his press conference after the first round, Liam Cohen directly said that Travis Hunter is going to be used primarily on offense and then mixed into things defensively. So my expectations are pretty much full-time wide receiver with maybe 40 to 50%-ish part-time at defensive back, but my attention, of course, is obviously all directed to what Travis Hunter can do offensively. Remember, this is a Jaguars team with 110 vacated targets from Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram last year, and what should be a very improved offensive system under Liam Cohen, which means more sustained drives, more plays, more volumes, more touchdown opportunity for everyone, especially with how much better Travis Hunter is than anybody else that the Jaguars currently have other than Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, it's not even funny how much better Travis Hunter is at wide receiver than Gabe Davis and Parker Washington, who also both combined for over 90 targets last year because they had no one else to throw to after Brian Thomas Jr. BTJ is still going to be the alpha with 130, 140 plus targets, but there is absolutely room for Travis Hunter to see 120 plus targets himself. Plus, we get Brenton Strange to be a solid streaming option, plus some fantasy upside in that backfield with Travis Etienne or Bayshal Tootin. Do not underestimate the impact Travis Hunter can have on this Jaguars team and on Trevor Lawrence as well. And do not fade Hunter because of any fears of defensive usage or anything like that. He is my wide receiver 1A in this class, and I am ecstatic to take him as a top 4 or 5 pick in any league. But then as for Tet McMillan, my wide receiver 1B, I love the landing spot with the Carolina Panthers. He is everything that the Panthers need at the wide receiver position. He is everything that Bryce Young needs to continue developing and building off his strong end-of-season finish last year. And I would not be shocked if he was the most productive rookie wide receiver in 2025, if he put up over 1,000 yards as a rookie. And if he does that, he's probably a top 12, maybe even a top 10 Dynasty wide receiver this time next year. Just like Travis Hunter, I am ecstatic to take Tet anywhere in the top 4 to 5 in any league. And if you miss out on Travis Hunter, then I'm just as happy to get Tet McMillan, and vice versa. Honestly, if you miss out on Tet McMillan, I am super excited to also get Travis Hunter. Up next in a tier of his own is just Emeka Egbuka. And I understand if people are hesitant on the landing spot in Tampa Bay because it is crowded right now, but the pathway is very clear starting in 2026. Mike Evans is a 33-year-old free agent next year, and who's to say he doesn't even retire after this season if he has another 1,000-yard season? He breaks Jerry Rice's record. He already has a Super Bowl ring, and he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer. If that happens, then it's Egbuka and Godwin as the 1A, 1B in this offense for Baker Mayfield. And it's not like we haven't seen Evans miss games recently either. He missed 3 games last year, 2 in 2022. He's also going to be 32 years old this year. Godwin is also going to be 29 years old this year, coming off of a pretty bad ankle injury, so it's not impossible for Egbuka to be very relevant in 2025, just like Jalen McMillan was very relevant to end the year last year as that injury fill-in. At the very worst, he's this year's version of Rome Odunze, who was last year's version of JSN, and we just have to wait a year for a true breakout opportunity. I trust the talent, I trust Baker Mayfield, I trust this offense, and I trust the Dynasty community to also hold Egbuka's value heading into next year, especially if the 2026 wide receiver class doesn't look to be all that strong. All right, tier 3 is where things really start to get fun for this wide receiver class, and this tier is 5 names deep for me, starting with Jaden Higgins, then we get to Trey Harris, Kyle Williams, Luther Burden, and Matthew Golden, and in that order. I won't lie, I am kind of chasing landing spots a bit here by fading the draft capital of Matthew Golden and Luther Burden, but I'm also trying to follow my marker system as well, which actually has Kyle Williams graded as the 2nd best receiver in this tier, even with the 3rd round draft capital. But let's start at the top though with Jaden Higgins, because I love the landing spot of the Houston Texans as the other perimeter weapon across from Nico Collins, where he won't ever have to face the opposing team's best defensive back. and he gets CJ Stroud throwing him the ball, which is a very nice plus. It's really just a perfect fit, and the fact that Houston picked Higgins as the 5th receiver off the board is also giving me a ton of confidence to put my trust into him in rookie drafts around the end of the first rounds, or even ideally the early second. Now, similarly, Trey Harris also gets his ideal landing spot that everybody was hoping for with the LA Chargers. He is 100% the Quentin Johnston replacement as the perimeter wide receiver weapon that they very much needed to go with Ladd McConkey. This honestly feels so much like Harbaugh is just trying to recreate his 2014 Niners team that also had Greg Roman at offensive coordinator. Frank Gore rushed for over 1,100 yards that year at 31 years old. Anquan Boldin was their PPR guy with over 80 receptions for almost 1,100 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. And Michael Crabtree was their perimeter field stretcher who also saw almost 110 targets. What really held that offense back was really just quarterback play, but Justin Herbert is so much better than Colin Kaepernick, and that should elevate Ladd McConkey and Trey Harris more than their Niner counterparts over a decade ago. Not to mention that both receivers are just vastly younger and way better in their ages and their careers at this point than their wide receiver counterparts, as well as Omarion Hampton being significantly younger and probably better than Frank Gore at that point in his career as well. This offense can be just so very explosive, and I love buying into everybody on that team, especially Trey Harris in the early second of rookie drafts. Now we get to Kyle Williams. Man, do I love this landing spot for him as the wide receiver 1 for Drake May. And I think it's even funnier because my comp for him was in a kind of Stephon Diggs mold, and now he's on the same team as Stephon Diggs, just at very different points in their careers. The reason why I have Kyle Williams so high and above 2 players that got kind of significantly better draft capital than him is because I'm placing my trust in my marker system again, the same way that I did with Rashee Rice just a couple years ago. Back in 2023, Rice graded out as the wide receiver 7 in my marker system, but he was just barely behind Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, and Josh Downs, especially with the fact that Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnston were both first-round picks. But of those 7 wide receivers that he was in with, Rice was 3rd in PFF markers hit behind only Jackson Smith-Njigba and Quentin Johnston. Plus, he was the 5th receiver off the board, being paired with Patrick Mahomes in an offense that very much needed a wide receiver after trading Tyreek Hill away the year before. So I bought into Rashee Rice, and that worked out very well pretty much up until his knee injury last year. Fast forward to today, Kyle Williams is grading out as the wide receiver 4 in my marker system, ahead of Egbuka, Higgins, Harris, and Matthew Golden. And of those top 8 wide receivers that we have just talked about in general in this video, Williams is tied for 2nd in PFF markers behind only Emeka Egbuka, and he's being paired with a hopefully ascending Drake May in an offense that very much needs a wide receiver. I was drafting Rashee Rice in the early second in 2023, anywhere from like the 202 to the 205-ish, but I saw him go even later than that in some rookie drafts, and I'm doing the exact same thing with Kyle Williams, who is currently my 2.04 in Superflex and is ahead of Matthew Golden and Luther Burden. He's a very good wide receiver. The analytics are all a reflection of his tape. He has the size, he has the speed, he has the separation skills. Everything is there for him to be a great wide receiver in the NFL, and the opportunity is just amazing for him to make an immediate impact as Drake May's wide receiver 1. I was honestly very tempted to put him ahead of both Jaden Higgins and Trey Harris, but I love their landing spots and their ceilings a lot too. They were drafted earlier, so I went with the NFL draft and the draft capital there, but they're all in one big tier, and if you want to take the shot on Kyle Williams as the wide receiver 1 in this kind of tier, please do it. Then we get to Luther Burden, and I'm having such a hard time wrapping my brain around this one from a fantasy football perspective in terms of how all of this is going to work in Chicago. I mean, from a Caleb Williams and just a Bears team building standpoint, what Chicago has done since hiring Ben Johnson has been absolutely phenomenal for their offense. They fixed their offensive line in free agency and with a 2nd-round tackle. They draft Colson Loveland and Luther Burden. I mean, it is beautiful if you have Caleb Williams on your dynasty team. What I can't wrap my head around, though, is the math of how all of this is going to work for fantasy football. You thought there were a bunch of mouths to feed in Detroit under Ben Johnson? Try this offense now, and nothing is changing anytime soon. DJ Moore is signed through 2029. Rome Odunze, with his 5th-year option, is there through 2028. Colston Loveland with a 5th-year option there through 2029, and Burden is there through 2028 on his rookie contract too. This group is the Bears offense for the next 4 to 5 years contractually, and it's going to be extremely messy for fantasy unless Caleb Williams turns into like Broncos Peyton Manning, throwing for over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns every single year, which, I mean, maybe he will be, who actually knows, but I just don't love this for Luther Burden, and that's why he's dropped to wide receiver 7 in this class, maybe even wide receiver 8 if you guys prefer Matthew Golden and if you prefer that draft capital. Personally, I am still willing to buy into the talent. He is a perfect fit for Ben Johnson's offense as a slot guy, and who knows? Maybe he is better than Rome Odunze. Maybe DJ Moore is gone in a couple of years with a contract or he gets traded. Burden has a traditional 3rd-year breakout after DJ Moore leaves and then has like a Chris Godwin type of career from years 3 through 8. Maybe Caleb Williams can support everybody. I mean, the point is you could do a lot worse in the mid-second if Burden is there, which I imagine he might be with all the other amazing landing spots in the draft capital for other wide receivers and running backs in this class. And then finally, to wrap up this tier, we get to Matthew Golden. Now, if you've watched this channel, you've watched my videos all draft season, including my round 1 recap on Friday, you just know that I am not a Matthew Golden fan. He does grade out as the wide receiver 7 in my marker system, though he is tied with wide receiver 8 Trey Harris, and I personally prefer Trey Harris's landing spot and opportunity over Matthew Golden's, as I just explained just a minute or two ago. I just don't believe that Matthew Golden suddenly makes a mark on a Green Bay Packers team with Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks and Tucker Kraft at tight end when he could barely make a mark on 2 different teams in college that was pretty much necessary for Isaiah Bond to not even play for him to finally get an opportunity last year at Texas. He's just not a wide receiver that's for me, and I'm gladly going to let someone else take him ahead of me. Now, tier 4 is pretty much the last 2 receivers that I have enough interest in to actually draft in my rookie drafts, because after that, I'm probably honestly just taking a running back, maybe even a shot on a tight end. This tier is just Jalen Noel and Jack Besh, 2 very interesting names taken in the middle of day 2. Besh did actually get drafted in round 2 to a great landing spot with the Vegas Raiders, but I just really haven't also been the biggest Jack Besh fan like everyone else appears to be. People really want him to be this year's Ladd McConkey or even this year's Puka Nacua, but I just don't see it, and his analytical profile isn't anywhere near those 2 either. He's another guy that I think is just going to get boosted up high because of draft capital and landing spot that I'm just going to let someone else take. Plus, I mean, how many times are we going to swing and miss on TCU wide receivers before we learn our lesson? I mean, come on, man. Jalen Noel actually interests me a lot more than Jack Besh, and I think that he's better than Jack Besh. He was certainly more productive in college. He also, funny enough, gets paired back with Jaden Higgins on the Houston Texans, who certainly need the wide receiver help. Now, I've been team Jaden Higgins over Jalen Noel all draft season, and the Texans very clearly agreed with that as well, but I know a ton of respected analysts who feel the opposite way, and the opposite might be true too. I mean, maybe CJ Stroud likes Jalen Noel more for his separation skills as that more Diggs or Tank Dell type of player rather than another wide receiver on the outside, which why throw to Jaden Higgins when Nico Collins is just that much better anyway? Regardless, it is certainly not out of the range of possibilities that Jalen Noel is just a better fantasy player than Jaden Higgins, and I am willing to take that shot all day long in the late 2nd round. So that is officially my top 10 rookie wide receivers for the 2025 class. Now, as for the rest of the wide receiver rankings, this is how everything shakes out with the other day 2 picks and some very interesting day 3 picks. Pat Bryant, I find, is interesting as the potential wide receiver 2 for Bo Nix. He kind of feels like a discount Jaden Higgins to a degree. Ty Felton is very fun as the wide receiver 3 in Minnesota, but I just don't really think that that translates well for fantasy. Isaac Tesla, I think, is a fantastic addition for the Detroit Lions to essentially replace that Josh Reynolds role that they lost last year as depth behind Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams, but just kind of like Ty Felton, not really sure if that translates to all that much for fantasy football in that offense behind those wide receivers. I will admit, Jalen Lane has some of my attention as a Washington Commander. The Titans had a field day in round 4 with Alec Ayomaner and Kymir DK, plus Gunnar Helm at the tight end position, all within like 10 picks of each other. I do prefer Ayomaner there as my bet for their wide receiver 2, but it was interesting that they preferred DK pretty much an entire round earlier. Jalen Royals sadly landed in Kansas City late on day 3. He might be their long-term shot after Hollywood Brown since he's only on another 1-year deal. Maybe they're even looking past Rashee Rice if he doesn't return well from injury, with 2 years left on his rookie deal counting this season. But the immediate production for Jalen Royals is probably not really there, and that does make me sad. Now, the one player that I do want to really shout out is Torrey Horton, a guy that I actually highlighted, I think, back in February as a major sleeper to watch for at the Combine and then in rookie drafts. He actually landed with the Seattle Seahawks in the mid to late 5th, and I absolutely love that landing spot. The Seahawks need speed on their offense. We know that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is just not good. Plus, Cooper Kupp is getting old. Maybe he is actually dust after how he ended last year. So I really wouldn't be surprised at all if Torrey Horton ends up being this year's Jalen Coker, or maybe even more, as a legitimate weapon in this Seahawks offense for Sam Darnold. But outside of that, and pretty much everybody after Torrey Horton, when you're this deep in rookie drafts, even to where you're honestly debating taking Pat Bryant and Alec Ayomaner and even really Torrey Horton, I'm probably honestly more looking at the running back position anyway to try to hit on a spot start handcuff rather than a likely wide receiver 4 or 5 on an NFL team. But speaking of running backs, if you want to check out my final post-draft rookie running back rankings, then you can check that out right up here.